Alex, I feel like I have to start with you. I've read your piece twice now, and it's breathtaking, and it's titled Our Asian Spring. Talk about it.
I think to be Asian in this moment is to be reconciling the amount of pain and injustice that I think we have all been living with, but perhaps in the best case scenario are newly awoken to. And the example I use is my mother, who grew up in the sunset of British colonialism and wasn't allowed to use her Burmese name when she went to school. Her name is Tinsway Thant. But when she was enrolling in high school, they asked my grandfather, what is her English name? As if it would be entirely improper for her to be called her actual Burmese name in school. And so she was given an English name, and she is known to this day to all of her Burmese friends and family as Maureen, her adopted English name. She has lived with this duality. We accepted that duality as a family. And in this moment, it really crystallizes for me the ways in which Asians of all stripes, it's hard to speak monolithically, but so many Asians have answered to the wrong names. They have put up with soft or explicit or latent bigotry. They have seen their family members put in harm's way as the result of the rhetoric of this president, but it is something that's been happening for decades and decades. But this moment feels different, Nicole, because they have witnessed what Black and brown-skinned brethren on the front lines have been doing in the Black Lives Matter movement. They have seen agents of change. They have seen the tools that are at our disposal, and they are ready to stand up and do something about it. And in that way, it's a terrifying moment, of course, but it's also really exhilarating.
You know, and Jeff, the president and vice president have singled out this day, this trip, this week for their first joint travel. The right is spending a lot of time talking about sex addiction, and we should assert that the motive for this mass shooting is at this hour unclear. But the victims, let's put their names up. The victims, 6 of the 8 victims, are Asian women. And the son of one of them, Randy Park, he's 23 years old, said this of his mother, quote, "She was a single mother who dedicated her whole life to providing for my brother and I. The rest of their family is still in South Korea." He went on, quote, "She was one of my best friends and the strongest influence on who we are today. Losing her has put a new lens on my eyes on the amount of hate that exists in our world." What is the president and vice president's message there to this community today?
And hearing any son have to say that about his now dead mother just takes your breath away. On our way down here, Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that the president, when he addresses reporters and makes his remarks later this hour, that the president will meet the moment that we are in. And just think about the moment that we are in. The group AAPI Hate, Stop AAPI Hate, which tracks instances of anti-Asian hate, found that there have been some 3,800 anti-Asian instances of violence in just the last year alone, since May 2020, when in any other given year, there might be 100 or so instances of violence. So that's a 380% increase. And those violent attacks didn't happen in a vacuum. They were happening at precisely the same time, during which you articulated in the open of the show, during all of that rhetoric from President Trump. And so now President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris find themselves in a position to really have to undo all of that, undo it with their own rhetoric, but to also do it by marshaling a whole of government approach to stop it. I was talking via text with one of the people who were now in the room with the president and vice president and a number of Asian American elected leaders here in Georgia and a couple of other Asian American community advocates. And one of the things this person said to me is that, they welcome the empathy from President Biden. But what they really need are resources that will yield results. Now, President Biden is calling on Congress to pass the COVID-19 hate legislation that would make it easier for folks to report instances of anti-Asian hate, and it would also, marshal more resources. So that's just one way, but that requires Congress to do that work, and we know how that may or may not go. So there is a heavy lift here. And yes, as authorities compile facts and evidence in this specific case here in Atlanta, it's worth noting, and I think Alex spoke to this so beautifully, the way people feel about this is not contingent on the facts, really, of this specific case, not in this moment. And so that is what President Biden is going to try to address. He's going to try to meet the moment, as Karine said he would.
Well, and whatever the investigation yields, Rev, it is the toxic combination of hatred and easy access to guns that led to the deaths of 8 individuals there in Atlanta. It is also true, as Alex writes about and as Jeff has reported, that Asian Americans have been, and everyone that's come on this show has made the point that they have mostly suffered silently, that there hasn't been, and that is the fault of all of us in the media as well, there hasn't been a particularly robust conversation about all the hatred incited and directed toward Asian Americans in this country as a result of all the rhetoric. And I remember Donald Trump calling it the Kung flu and the Asia virus and getting pressed by White House reporters. I think members of his cabinet also used that term. And he said it this week on Fox News. So you've been in this fight against hate for decades. What does this front feel like to you in this moment?
Well, this front shows us that when you have a atmosphere, a climate of scapegoating based on race or nationality, then you have those that will be incited to move forward and do something in that regard. There is no other explanation between the increase in the violence and the picking on all the way to the killing of Asian Americans, other than the rhetoric coming from the White House. Why all of a sudden this uptick? And many of us have been raising this before what has happened in Atlanta. State Senator John Lewis of New York and I did a thing together 3 weeks ago on this issue. And now we have what happens in Atlanta, whether they call it a hate crime or not. This man went to 3 different places that was mostly populated by Asian American employees. They're not the only ones that have institutions that deal with sex or deal with sex-related kind of massages or whatever they do. So clearly it appears it was targeted. But taking the particular case away, when you look at this increase, and you look at the fact that Asian Americans have been the ones that have been pinpointed by the sitting president of the United States with falsehood. There is no such thing as Kung flu. There is no such thing. So this is a purposeful, derogatory insult. And I think that it was important. Yesterday we had all of the New York City mayoral candidates come to our headquarters. It's important for African Americans and Latinos and others that know what hate is to stand up with Asian Americans now, because we know what it is. And in many cases, Nicole, Asian Americans stood with us with George Floyd all the way back to Sean Bell in New York. I can tell you Asian American activists that have been there, and we need to be there for them. And the president needs to be unequivocal that they're going to deal with hate crimes and they're going to deal with it in an unrelenting way and show the difference between a provocateur in the White House and a president in the White House.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.